Hello, and welcome to Finding Your North Star, the hgkc podcast series where we talk to prominent business people about their experiences and challenges of innovation. I recently became a director of Somerset Chamber of Commerce, and the more I've found out about what's going on in the county, the more excited I've become. So in this new series of podcasts, we're focusing on Somerset. Situated to the south of Bristol and extending from the mouth of the Severn to Devon in the south, and across the M5 to Wiltshire and Dorset in the east, Somerset is a county of contrasts. It's rural, but with one of the biggest concentrations of precision engineering in Europe. It's a county with a declining birth rate that many people retire to, but with opportunities for skilled work such as those offered at Hinkley Point C and by Agratas on the former Royal Ordnance factory site that are turning Bridgwater into a boomtown. There's no university, but it has several highly innovative colleges such as Bridgwater and Taunton and Yeovil that are contributing to skills development for young and old alike, but there's a skills crisis. Somerset presents a unique combination of challenges and opportunities. I'm Peter Quintana, and I'm delighted that in this podcast we'll be exploring Somerset with Sam Harper, Director of Planning and Growth at Stantec. So welcome, Sam. Great to talk to you.
Thank you, Peter. Lovely to be here. Thank you for having me.
Before we get into it, can you just introduce yourself to our listeners, please?
Of course, yeah. As you said, I'm Sam Harper. I'm a Director of Planning and Growth here at Stantec. We're based in Taunton. Got our office on Blackbrook Business Park. And yeah, as you said, I live and work here in Somerset.
Excellent. So when we met for the first time earlier this year, you told me that you'd lived and worked in Somerset all your life. It was that conversation, actually, that was the seed for this podcast series. So what is it that's kept you here all these years?
Somerset's a wonderful place. I'm a proud Somerset person. I was born in Yeovil, spent my first 25, 26 years living in Crewkerne, grew up there, went to school at Wadham, and then moved up to Taunton. I've lived in Bridgwater and Taunton. I've been really lucky to have worked on some great projects in the locality. You've mentioned a couple there, Hinkley Point C, and also Gravity, the former Royal Ordnance factory, and now with Agratas. So I've been very, very lucky. I think the opportunity to stay here has been one which I suppose happened for me as I came back from university, did some traveling, and then it was the recession, 2008. Looking for jobs was a fairly challenging thing to do, having just landed back in the country of May 2008. So staying at home was really the only option financially. But as it is, it's been something which I've really enjoyed. Like I say, I'm a proud Somerset person. I love the cricket, a great time of year at the moment with the T20 going on. And I really enjoy living and working in Taunton because it's a great town. And as I said, there's so many opportunities, I think, in the locality. And I've been very privileged to work on some great projects. So yeah, just a wonderful place. Being able to get to the coast, to the quality of life, out on my bike around the Black Downs and the Contocks, some wonderful wildlife as well. I'm a big nature lover, love being across the levels, Avalon Marshes, all the wonderful coastal areas we've got as well, and the ability to get down to Devon and Cornwall's coast and Dorset coast. So for me, the mix of quality of life, the opportunities, and the ability to work at an employer like Stantec here in Taunton. Our headquarters are in Edmonton. In Canada, there's 40,000 of us across the planet, but we have a Taunton office, which is exceptional and something I'm really proud to be involved in the leadership of.
Excellent. So did you start out working at Stantec, or did you do something else before you joined them?
No, so I've had a mixed background of working in local authority and the private sector. I went as far north as Bristol for my geography degree. And did 3 years up there. And then I did a master's in town and country planning, which was funded through working in local government, which was a graduate role. I spent time working at Exmoor National Park Authority, spent time working at the former Sedgemoor District Council, which is where I was engaged in the Hinkley project. And then I've worked at a couple of consultancies as well before joining Stantec in 2019, where our role grew in terms of what was then the Huntsman Energy Park, the former Royal Ordnance factory, and it then became Gravity. And then I've continued my role here since 2019, growing into a leadership role in terms of the planning team, but also in terms of focusing on growth as well.
Yeah, I was going to ask you how Stantec's been involved with the major construction projects going on in the county, because it's been involved in, well, you've already mentioned Hinkley and Agratas, haven't you?
Yeah, so we've been in Taunton for over 20 years now. The previous firm was PBA, acquired by Stantec again in 2019. We were involved in some of the first works out at Hinkley, some of the temporary works at Hinkley Point C under the original consent there. So we've been involved in that project on and off for a long time. We're supporting again with some of the ongoing works now through the planning team. We've been, as I mentioned, we've been involved in the Gravity site, Agratas now, again, since 2008. So we were there. BAE Systems obviously used to own that site when they shut it down. And we were one of the first consultants on that project back in 2008. and our role there has grown. And with me coming across, we took on the reconsenting of the sites to the local development order, which is a sort of form of planning consent, which provides a lot of flexibility. And I acted as sort of our project manager and our lead planner on that in terms of gaining that consent through 2020, 2021, a lot of online webinars and back bedroom meetings and things on Teams as it was through COVID. And we were really proud to be involved in that consent. But we're also working at Junction 24, at the Notaro site there, working now with the first potential occupiers on that site. And we've worked for a long time here in Taunton on projects like Nexus. So it's a local development order at Nexus. We've worked on that site for a number of years. So we have that core heartland from our Taunton office, that's Junction 23, 24, 25 on the M5. But also then some of the projects I'm quite proud of, the smaller projects we've been involved in our town centres. So we supported the Yeovil refresh works over in Yeovil. Similarly, the public realm works in Chard we've been involved with. And in Bridgewater, we're involved in the Celebration Mile delivery as well. We've been involved in that for a long time. Again, a project I was aware of and worked on when I was at Sedgemoor. I had the privilege now of working on this side of the fence as well. And in Taunton, the Future High Streets Funds work. So the work's going on through the town centre. Actually, a little project I'm really proud of is the scheme for the new crossing at the top of the High Street over to Vivery. If you know Taunton, it was one that was sort of set to the side, and it was a narrow little, if only pedestrians could get across. It's been moved. It's a bit wider, cyclists and pedestrians can get across now. And I was at the Wyvern fireworks back in November, listening to a conversation, and someone saying, "Oh, that new crossing's great. I can get across so much quicker now. It's great. I go across it every day going to work. It's brilliant. I can cycle across now." And I thought, that's the best customer feedback you can ever get. So that's those sort of projects, like I say, major projects, but also some of those smaller projects in the locality that we're really proud to be engaged with as well.
Yeah, excellent. Well, I want to talk about some of the more major projects and particularly Hinkley Point, because construction's already had a significant economic and social impact on the region, hasn't it? And but looking ahead, what long-term benefits or risks even do you see for Somerset as the project nears completion?
They're nearly at peak, aren't they, now, in terms of numbers on site? We've all heard about the growing numbers and the requirements for additional accommodation to support the staff and the workforce and so on and so forth. But look, we all know Hinkley's had a significant sort of socio-economic benefit. The opportunities are brilliant. The consortia like Somerset Larder being a great example have been absolutely wonderful. The experience, the training that's happened, having facilities like the National College for Nuclear, the Construction Skills Centre out at Cannington, brilliant assets. And like I say, the legacy that we make sure we retain in Somerset from those is fundamental. Yes, there'll be challenges. We talk about boom and bust, don't we? And there's that many 15,000 jobs I think it's going to be shortly out there, challenging to retain all of those in Somerset. But projects like Agritas that I've talked about are really good opportunities. That's permanent jobs. With Hinkley, I think there'll be 700 full-time jobs and 200 contractor jobs, so 900 jobs in total as through operation. Gravity, in its current state, 650 acres across the whole site, has the ability to deliver 7,500, 9,000 jobs, permanent jobs. So we're talking 60, 70, 100 years worth of jobs. And there's an opportunity for that site to do more as well and think about absolutely what can be done to create further opportunity there. Alongside that, I've mentioned Nexus. What happens there next? Perhaps not quite the example that was expected with the consent a few years ago, but what does happen on that site next? And similarly, Junction 24 and even down at 26 at Wellington as well, what comes next down there? We've got really good sites, and we need to make sure that we create the environment in Somerset for those sites along the motorway and elsewhere over in Yeovil as well, and in other parts of Somerset where we have good jobs coming. We have the land, we have the right environment for investment to make sure that those skills and that workforce can stay. And not just that workforce from Hinkley, but also those that are being trained, who are being inspired by those projects that are happening in Somerset, for them to stay as well. The last thing we want is for them all to ship off over to Sizewell, frankly. It's a long way over to the Suffolk coast, I can confirm, because I've been over there and done a bit of work myself. So we want them all, as many as possible, to stay and work and continue to be involved in the opportunity and the fantastic future that we have in Somerset. So, yeah, I'm positive. Yes, there'll be challenges, but I think we've got the makings of a locality that can support the retention of the benefit and maximise that legacy. And I know people like Andrew Cockcroft and his team in EDF are thinking hard about how we can make sure that happens for Somerset. So it's not a one-way thing. We need to work with EDF, work with Andrew and his team to say, look, what can we do to make sure we're realising the legacy and we're maximising the benefits?
I think it's one of the things I like about the way Hinkley Point has been managed over the years is that idea that it should be focused on the legacy for Somerset itself and the people that live here. And I think it seems like that's going well. But you talked a little bit about current business environment. Lots going on, Junction 24. You mentioned Junction 26, and I know there's a new junction planned for the M5 as well, as I understand it. But so the current business environment seems to be pretty positive and optimistic. What do you think is working well? And what do you think are the persistent barriers to growth, innovation, or collaboration across the county?
Look, you mentioned skills in the sort of preamble introduction, didn't you? It's always a challenge for us. And I think we can come on to perhaps talk about some of the training and the opportunities we have and some of our wonderful institutions here in Somerset in a moment. But it is skills which are a challenge. Confidence, obviously, is a challenge. I spoke at a recent chamber event about the future of Somerset over at Haynes.
Yeah, I was there.
Excellent. Good. Yeah. And I think I'll make the same point, frankly, for anybody that's missed it. A lot of that responsibility, I think, sits with us as the business community to look for opportunities to be optimistic. We have huge macroeconomic challenges, don't we? Let's not mention some things happening in North America or in other parts of the planet that we can't control. What can we control? I would always advocate for focusing on the things you can control. We can sit and navel gaze or moan and whinge about things that are out of our control for hours on end. We all like to, don't we? Sometimes over a pint, sometimes over dinner. But what can we control? What we can do as businesses and individuals is look for opportunities to address those challenges. One of the things I mentioned, skills is a shortage. We've got lots of young people who do leave Somerset, who travel elsewhere. I mentioned that I went to Bristol, but I came back, thankfully. I'm really glad that the environment allowed me to do that. But we need to tell people about what the opportunities are here in Somerset. As businesses, we need to be out there in schools, at careers fairs, through work experience, through outreach and engagement. Perhaps we can do more through the chamber to facilitate really good days where businesses and the future workforce get together. And that helps to address our skills challenge, which is one big thing. The point about investment, I appreciate, is a challenge. It's a difficult environment, isn't it? Particularly with SMEs at the moment. We know some of the challenges around changes to tax and so on and so forth, and we're all feeling that. But like I say, opportunities for businesses to look at getting support, supporting one another, sharing experience, best practice, things like that, again, through the chamber, perhaps as a good example, to try to minimize impact for mitigation for some of those challenges. And like I say, as I said at the outset, if we can find opportunities to be optimistic, we're part of the discourse, aren't we? If we're talking negatively, if we're being negative, it becomes that self-fulfilling prophecy. Let's be part of the positive discourse. Let's find opportunities to talk about the things we can change and be optimistic, and it starts to slowly turn the tide. And like I say, shout about the good things we're doing, shout about the positive experiences we're having, share that experience, and hopefully that starts to create a more confident and positive environment.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about youth retention and the demographic challenges. You've spent your life living and working in Somerset, but the county does face some fairly stiff demographic challenges. We've got a reducing birth rate. We've got an aging population. And I know the new prosperity strategy has just been adopted, but how do you think that strategy should address issues such as youth retention and an aging population?
Yeah, so I think I've mentioned sort of the word environment quite a lot, and we've got to create the right environment in Somerset for the young people to want to stay. And when I say the right environment, I mean we need to have a positive, open for business locality and environment. I've talked with MPs through Gideon Amos, with Mike Rigby, with Bill Revans about what the council's role is in that. I recognise the council have had a real challenge over the last few years and financially continue to have a real challenge. But it feels at the moment that we do have a positive sort of political environment where they do want to do things differently. When I worked at Sedgemoor, we were very, very positive. We had a very clear political drive around delivery, around growth, around making sure we had the right land in the right places. We were positive. We had a really strong engagement with the market, and we understood what the market wanted to deliver, and we created the environment, again, for the market to deliver, to come and invest and make things happen. And I think if you go to Bridgewater now, you'll have seen significant change over the last 10 years. I'm proud to have played a part in that. That resulted in the ability to attract significant investment. We've talked about Gravity and Agritas, we've talked about the sites at Junction 24, but within that as well, there's some great sites at Woodlands Business Park. All the land up towards Junction 2023 has come forward up the Bristol Road as well. Some of our local businesses investing there as well, which is great, which we've been able to support. And obviously going back as far as the Morrison's building as well. So we have an example in Somerset of a local authority where we were able to deliver and we had a positive outlook. And yeah, we were lucky we had clear political leadership. We had a single narrative between the politics and what we were trying to achieve as officers. But actually in Somerset now, we also have a clear, pretty strong political narrative where we have primarily similar political parties. And that is a really good start. And now we've got to turn that political leadership, and with Bill and Mike and their colleagues and David Warren really pushing to facilitate things to happen and to speak positively to businesses to create the right sort of environment for investment. And yeah, the planning team have got a challenge at the moment, but hopefully they've taken the first step to create the right environment for decisions to be made efficiently and quickly to give confidence through a planning process that things can start to happen. And yeah, that is a fundamental point for me. You'd expect me to say that, wouldn't you? But we need the land, for jobs and housing. That's what delivers growth. The government are very clear about it at the moment. If we don't deliver housing, we don't deliver the opportunity for growth. We aren't going to recoup taxes. We aren't going to recoup, the rates that then fund the public sector. We all know the challenges around the public sector. We are potentially, aren't we, staring down the barrel of a challenging budget again in October. So we need to start delivering growth. Somerset's role in that is to deliver the homes and the jobs, and we have to have the ability to do that. That creates confidence. We all know, don't we, the UK economy revolves heavily around success in the housing market and in around land and development and construction. So we have to create the right environment for that in Somerset, and that's our role in ensuring UK PLC has got a more positive outlook going forward, and hopefully reducing the burden on the businesses and the individuals from a tax perspective.
Yeah, but we also, I think, have to make sure that we balance all of these opportunities with the fact that Somerset is a rural county. And you referred to the Avalon area earlier that you like to cycle through, and the levels and places like that. We can't risk losing the English countryside that is so fabulous here in Somerset, and all of the produce that comes from that as well. The milk for the cheese that we produce, and the apples that we grow for the cider that many people enjoy, and all of those things come from the fields that some developers are looking to buy and build on. So how do we find that balance?
Yeah, real challenge. And it's the perennial issue of being a town planner. We hear a lot about newts, don't we? We hear a lot about the environment. We hear a lot about challenges around flood risk. You have to balance all of those things and consider the benefits. Now, I've talked a lot about the economic benefits. Those are another consideration that we have to take account of. We have to take account of housing need. We have to take account of affordability of housing. We have to take account of deliverability, so the cost of projects coming forward. So we have to balance all of those things, and that is, like I say, part of the challenge, and probably what makes town planners, frankly, so unpopular, because actually we have to compromise endlessly, and we have to sometimes prioritise facets that aren't your individual priority. If you're concerned about development, look. The reality is, if we delivered the housing that we need to deliver in the UK to meet our current housing need, we need 1% of the land. And I would say, where do you want your family and your children and your grandchildren to live and work? Because otherwise they're going to continue travelling to Bristol and London and Birmingham and other parts of the country. So what's your priority? Like I say, put yourself into the role of the local authority, the government, the planners. What is your priority? Do you want places for your family and your children and your grandchildren to live, and opportunities for them to work and stay in Somerset and enjoy the great places that we have? Or is your priority protecting exactly what we have and then letting it happen in Bristol or Exeter or in other places, and they can all go and live and work there? And I'm sorry to be so blunt, but that is kind of one simple way of addressing it.
I think that's a fair point. If we're going to focus on retaining youth in Somerset, we have to give them places to live and places to work as well. I get that completely. I do get that, and I understand.
Gravity is a really good example of that, to be honest, because the communities of Puriton and Wellavington are wonderful communities. I've spent a lot of time talking to the local people there. That site, obviously, as we mentioned, was the former Royal Ordnance Factory. Had 3,500 people working on it up into the early 2000s. Grandparents, parents, children have all worked there. They recognise that we need to have jobs so that the grandchildren, the future generations, can come. A lot of the conversations we've had there is about, when is this going to happen, so we've got more jobs locally. With that, yes, it brings housing, but it shows you that actually people's considerations can be more than just, well, what's happening next. And I appreciate that's a big brownfield site, which has always been industrial since the 1940s. And it is true, we need to maximise those sites first. The economics around brownfield sites are obviously very, very challenging. And the fact that that site was identified an enterprise zone, which allows business rates to be secured, and we successfully secured funding from the local enterprise partnership through the local growth fund to deliver the access road and things. It has obviously helped. But the bigger picture is that actually in places like Puriton and Wellavington, there's a recognition that we do need those jobs, we do need those opportunities for young people. So we have to recognise that with that comes some change, comes some disruption, comes some impact. But successful places across the planet are impacted. Every successful city has bad traffic.
Yeah.
Every successful town is affected in, you lose some of your green space. And if you're on the edge, if you have the privilege of living on the edge of a town, looking out from on one side onto a field, you should enjoy that whilst you can, because that is a privilege whilst you're there, and it is not a permanent privilege. And we have to recognize that, at some point where your house was, someone was looking at that as a field, and that is simply progress and population, change. So, yeah.
True. So following on to that, I suppose, what role do you think the academic institutions and innovation centres, research partnerships, etc., should play in shaping the county's economic future? And are we making the most of them?
So hugely important. Good question. The second part of that question about are we making the most of them, let's come back to that. But I'm a massive advocate for our economic institutions. I've done an awful lot, as you'd imagine, with being involved in Hinkley and now with Gravity and Agritas, with what was the former Bridgewater and Taunton College. As of the 1st of August, they become University Centre Somerset Colleges Group, haven't they? Having now merged with Strode College as well. So we now have this new college group, which includes the Taunton campus, the Bridgewater campus, the Strode campus, obviously, Cannington campus as well, and Yeovil College, another excellent academic institution, both working with other universities, whether from outside of Somerset as well, to support level 6 and level 7 training. We have wonderful training happening in our towns because of those institutions, and some really unique examples of training happening. I'll use the example out at Cannington for the Construction Skills Centre, because I was blown away when I saw it happening. Some of our more experienced workforce, should we say, that involved in construction projects don't have the necessary certificates because they haven't sat the exams, they hadn't gone through the training, the apprenticeships in the same way as the more recent trained people and workforce had. What Bridgewater and Taunton College did, they put a GoPro on their helmets and said, go and do that piece of work, go and construct that, connect those pipes, build that cover. And they recorded it and they marked the video and they give them the certificate. So we've got the people who are later on in their career that couldn't get onto construction sites because they didn't have the right certificate or couldn't earn the same hourly wage as the other people were, now have those certificates. So we have innovative training going on right here in Cannington, in a village in Somerset, where we are supporting people to earn more money, to improve their quality of life, to have a bit more money in their back pocket, to be able to work in more exciting projects. And that's really, really important. And that's why I've talked about housing delivery, and I've talked about development, and I've talked about growth. But actually, why I wanted to be a town planner was to improve our impact upon people, what we do, the environment, how we can support people. And when you see projects like that, where you have opportunities for people to engage and you see them being trained up and getting a better opportunity to earn more money and to do better for their families and bring a bit more in, then that's what it's all about. In Somerset, we need to do more of that. So that's just one example. I know Yeovil College do great work linking up with the innovation centres. We've got IAERO over in Yeovil, haven't we, which is wonderful. It's really fascinating work going on there. And also we've got the Digital Innovation Centre here in Taunton now, and others around the county. And it's working through some of that space to make sure we get the right occupiers in there to really drive innovation and get those sort of clusters of innovation happening. We've seen it happen in Bridgewater again with the Energy Innovation Centre, obviously linked to Hinkley, and that's been really successful. So we need to maximise those and talk to some of our really intelligent businesses who are on the cutting edge of innovation. I know Harry Singer's leading the growth board, isn't he, through his business out in West Somerset with Singer Instruments. And, we can learn a lot from that sort of business, and we can learn a lot from what they do to support our young people as well in terms of that training, making sure they're aware of those opportunities and linking up with the colleges and the training institutions to make sure that the training and skills development programs that they need to put people into their jobs are happening. And that's really fundamental, the relationship with businesses and the relationship with the colleges. And so we don't just have academic training courses happening, that when that person lands within a business, they're not prepared for that business. It needs to be from the other way. And that's what I know some of our institutions here in Somerset are really good at, going out to business, understanding what their needs are and designing curriculum around that to make sure that training is meeting the employer's needs. And that's probably the bit that we can do more of. More of us in business need to be telling and going to meet the colleges and the institutions to say, this is where we have our pinch point. We've talked about skills already, and I hear it everywhere I go. Skills are the problem. I've talked about going into schools. I've talked about going into telling the future workforce about your jobs. The other thing we need to be doing is going to the university and saying, this is the skills gap I have. Can you come and see the skills and training requirements I have? And you know what? They're really good at designing curricula. They'll come into your workplace. They'll watch what the role is. It might be manufacturing. It might be on a computer design based. They'll come and say, well, hang on, what's the role, what's the skills, and they can design curricula to meet that needs. And all of us can go and pick up the phone to people like Matt Tudor at Bridgewater Taunton College and Alex Clancy over at Yeovil College and say, who can I speak to? This is my sector, this is my skills need. And they have outreach people within those colleges that will sit with you, work through what your requirements are, and they can design curricula around your training needs. And it is brilliant, absolutely brilliant. And it makes me excited to see that happening, because that is a massive step in terms of retaining the skills and the individuals, and retaining young people in Somerset, and making sure that our businesses are getting what they need in terms of skills out of that process.
Excellent. So finally, what message would you like to send to young people leaving school and thinking about the job market?
Yeah, I do a lot with young people. I really enjoy engaging with students, with the pupils coming through our schools. I'm an enterprise advisor working through the Somerset Education Business Partnership and the Somerset Careers Hub with the team there. I'm a school governor. I'm always supporting our teams with STEM activities, outreach activities, making sure we've got a full calendar to engage with schools. So I'm putting our money where my mouth is around making sure we're out there and we're engaging with schools and we're engaging with young people. And do you know what I always say to them? Like, look around, try and open your eyes. What's more broad? I don't know how many people in Somerset have ended up doing the same job as their parents have done, but I bet it's an awful lot. I can think a lot of my friends who are doing the same job as their parents, but there is a lot more exciting things happening here. As I said, I'm really, really optimistic. Projects like Agritas are absolutely wonderful. We will have Europe's biggest battery manufacturing plant here in Somerset, and it's not just batteries for EVs, and you can be skeptical or cynical about EVs as much as you like, but that's the first step. Our whole lives are going to have to be electrified in the future. At some point, fossil fuels will run out. We will need to be better at storing energy wherever that's produced from, through renewable energy, most likely. We have to be able to store that. Our lives are going to be powered by electricity. We have, like I say, Europe's largest battery manufacturing plant here, landing in Somerset. It's great when you drive down the M5 now. You can see the steels going up. It's super exciting for me as a planner, seeing all the cranes up and the steels going up, particularly having worked on that site for a good 10 years or so. So it's about, let's say, having a look, seeing what's local, seeing what's here. You don't have to be focused on exactly what you want to do, but just engage to understand what your next steps are, which will open the doors for the future. That might be A-levels. If you've got a clearer line of sight, that might be an apprenticeship. It might be more general diplomas or different training qualifications, which will give you a broad understanding of certain areas. That might be engineering. My colleagues here in our office are engineers, and I didn't realize quite how many opportunities there was within the sort of realm of civil engineering. You know, we have people who are designing roads, people who are designing bridges, people who are designing reservoirs, people who are designing drainage, people who are designing utilities, people who are designing flood defences, all these different areas of civil engineering. So what I'm saying is you can be a bit general if you're not quite sure what you want to do, but you have an understanding of some of those areas. Yeah. And like I say, places like BTC, which is Hewish, Yeovil College, other training providers as you leave school will have ideas. Speak to people, look for work experience, try and broaden your network, and try and have a good understanding of what the opportunities are locally, because you might not believe it now, but when you get into your 30s and 40s, you'll really appreciate Somerset and the opportunity to get on your bike, get out round the levels or whatever, get up in the hills, get some fresh air, go to the coast. The fact we can be up in North Devon in an hour and a half or down in Lyme Regis in 40 minutes. These are wonderful, wonderful things to have on our doorstep, as well as I mentioned the Quantocks, the Mendips, the Blackdowns, the Somerset levels. We're very, very privileged. And you mentioned the cheese, and I quite like a cider as well. So all those things we have on our doorstep and we can be proud to still enjoy are wonderful. And if you can crack on and make a great career for yourself whilst living and working in Somerset, as I've been very, very privileged to do, then I think you've pretty much won at life, frankly. So there's no more stronger message than that, is there, to say let's do what we can to stay and work hard and enjoy our lives in Somerset.
Yeah, it certainly seems. I've lived here a few years now in the southwest, made my life in the southwest, albeit across the border in Wiltshire for a while before moving into Somerset about 6 or 7 years ago. And I think this is the place I want to end my days. It's such a great county. There's such a lot going on here, some great opportunities. And it's why I was inspired by you, in fact, to run this podcast series, because I think there's such a lot to talk about. So well, thank you. That seems a good place in which to end this conversation. It remains for me to thank you, Sam, for joining me. It's been a real pleasure to talk to you. You can find out a bit more about Stantec and the work they do in sustainable engineering, architecture and environmental consulting by visiting www.stantec.com/UK. If you'd like to find out more about HGKC, how we work with our clients on leadership, growth through innovation and preparation for exit, please visit our website, which is www.hgkc.co.uk. And if you're not a member of Somerset Chamber of Commerce, where you should be, please visit Chamber website to find out how the Chamber is supporting businesses across the county. So thank you for listening and goodbye. And thank you again, Sam, for this podcast.
Thank you, Peter.